sucks to the last drop. Are you gonna blow your head off? Take good aim and don't forget to duck. Life sucks every Monday and all the way to Sunday, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't care how you're doing, what's up or how's it hanging. I'd like to buy this world one last drink. Life sucks all of the time, stick it up your sunshine, and then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day.
Welcome to the Crazy Life, everybody. My name's Jen, and with me, of course, we have Bryan and Henno. Hey, guys.
Howdy.
Hello.
So glad to be back this week. This week's been actually kind of interesting. It's been a challenge for me to keep myself busy without having the framework of work. So it's been interesting, to say the least. I have, I guess, decided that I'm going to be an older person, maybe, because I started knitting and doing puzzles.
Well, puzzles are good for your mental health, though.
Yes, puzzles are good for your mental health, and as is knitting, because I'm knitting on a loom, which you don't have to do the counting that you do with needles, but you do have to use dexterity of the fingers, and and the mind and the hands have to work together and all that good jazz. So yeah, so that's been good, and so it's been an interesting week for me. How about you guys? How was your weeks? Henno, did you have a nice trip back?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was, you get that lovely kind of I can't sleep on a plane overnight flight thing, followed by a 4-hour layover that starts at 5 a.m. in an airport.
Awesome, right?
That's always fun.
Yeah, and then you have to do still another 2-3 hour flight, and then drive 2 more hours to get home. So yeah, and then you come home and you got a foot of snow in your driveway, plus
awesome.
a big berm. Yeah. It was great. That was the best part. Is I asked Sharon, I said, okay, I can get out and shovel this, or I can get a running start and drive your car as hard as I can into this. What say you? And she just said, gun it.
Yes.
Like, I love you, baby.
That's the answer we were all looking for.
That was it. Thank you.
That's awesome. How far did you make it? Did you make it all the way to the garage?
Oh, yeah, fully, all the way in. Yeah, because it was pretty fluffy. It was,
nice.
A foot of yeah, it was just a berm that had to be,
So it just looked like one of those like Jeep commercials where they're just snow's just blowing around them, and like they're just handling it like it's no big deal.
Exactly. Mm. Yeah, the old Ford Escape.
Yep.
So.
Awesome. That's funny.
Yeah, and then and the greatest thing is, so I got to, get out and snow blow, and I'm snow blowing, and Sharon's out there taking pictures of me. He's back. After, it was like 80 yesterday in Maui, and
now we're dealing with snow.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah,
Oh,
but it was
fun.
the best part though was, I get to work on Sunday, no problem. I work by myself, and I have usually a pretty mellow day. And then Monday, my boss had the day off too, so I had like 2 days of like no pressure.
Nice.
It's just perfect after a vacation. 'Cause
Yeah.
You never know, you get that nervousness, like, okay, I've been gone for a week. Am I no longer employed?
Right.
You're going to ease into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not to mention, if something happened while you were gone, like, were you walking back into anything, or, yeah.
Yeah, actually, something did, and luckily it was all my boss was the one that was the problem.
Nice.
Nothing's worse than when something happens when you're gone and like you made a mistake and you can't recover it. You're like,
yeah, there's nothing you can do. Yeah.
So,
but,
that sucks. Manage the damage.
Yeah, the problem is my boss is he struggles with mental illness too, and he's in a weird. He's kind of a borderline personality disorder, but as a result, it's like, if something comes down hard on him, it ends up coming down hard on all of us. And so it's a weird thing where you're sitting here kind of going. You kind of want him to get his comeuppance because he can be a real jerk. But, I also have a tremendous amount of sympathy for him because I know a lot of it is he's just a social, he doesn't know how to relate to human beings. He's amazing with a facility, and finally somebody kind of pointed it out to me that knew him from when they built the place. And he said that he actually has kind of autistic symptoms like autism because he's almost like a genius when it comes to physical things, but then on a personal level, he has a real hard time connecting. And that doesn't make a good supervisor.
No. Yeah.
No, not at all.
You can run into that a lot. Somebody who's great with numbers and all that stuff, and then they're put in a position to deal with people, and they're just not, it's just not the right spot,
Yeah.
Sounds maybe like a mild form of Asperger's.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more like an Asperger's kind of a thing. Yeah, and so that's why a lot of my, and like this podcast in particular, and just kind of like, well, you guys were talking, while the one show I wasn't on about what's changed for you, and the thing that's really changed for me, and it's really been in this last year or so, is I've really gained some sympathy and understanding for what other people go through, and to not take it personally. Like he actually has difficulties, and it helps me if I'm dealing with somebody that has difficulties, to actually to have some compassion for them, even though it's hard on me to deal with it. But there's something about putting it into perspective. And so like when my friend Chelsea said that, it's like an Asperger's kind of a thing. And I was like, wow, okay. It was good for me because it gave me, like I said, perspective to deal with the challenges that occur at work. And I like that in myself. I'd rather be a person that is more sympathetic and understanding, and, that people do need help, and, that kind of thing. I like that in me as a personality rather than the opposite of, what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, then the judgmental.
All that judgmental stuff that I think I used to have a great deal of. So,
yeah.
Well, with understanding also comes patience. And I feel it's much easier to have patience and to be able to tolerate certain circumstances if you can understand more of the root and more of what's going on.
Yeah.
So it just makes things easier.
Well, yeah, I was actually just talking to my therapist about this, about, helping other people understand what I need from them.
Yeah.
And how that's one of the hardest things for like working on myself and dealing with this, is that I'm not a person who likes to do that. I don't like to ask others for help. I don't like to make myself vulnerable, essentially. So that lays you so bare to people, because you tell them, you're like, it's like, I don't want to call them faults, but you're telling people essentially where your deficiencies are or whatever, and then you're saying, and this is what I need you to do, and then you've just laid so much power at someone's feet, because they really could brutalize you at that moment. But it's such a moment of trust. It shows how much that you trust a person when you do that, and they can't be part of your support system if they have no idea. Again, when the rules change, you have to inform everybody so that, we're all playing the same game.
Right.
And it's so difficult, you know. But once
that actually really relates to the topic.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just realized.
Yeah.
Yes,
It
yes,
really
it
does.
does. But before we get too far,
Wow.
Henno, do you have a win for the week?
Yeah, I had one of those moments with the advice that my good friend Gus said about how to have a healthy relationship is when you're wrong, promptly admit it, and when you're right, promptly forget it. And I exercised it last night.
It is so true. You know, how many times, like, you would be better off if you just celebrated that you are correct by yourself, away from wherever the discussion or argument or whatever is, you know, whether it's a boss, a spouse, just anyone in general, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're better off just walking away going, you know, like, I know I'm right, you know, like, and just celebrate that on your own, because, you know, basically, if you keep pointing out that you're right, you might as well be doing a touchdown celebration in front of the other person, you know. Look how right I am, and you're just dancing a fool, and yeah, it's just not helping.
Right.
Yeah, and the worst is never that one. It's more of the "I told you so" kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah,
where it's
for
like,
sure.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't. I'd rather be happy than right.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So
cool.
yeah, that was
so
that was my win.
you had a good aha moment, and you were able to navigate through it, huh?
Well, this is the part of what I call, you know, practicing these tools and all these things that we talk about is when we consciously put them into practice and make an effort to actually bring, not just talk about them, but bring them actually into our daily lives. Eventually, they become automatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, as I could feel my ire building inside of me, there was another part of me, this intuition that was saying, and you know how to handle this. You know, it's like, okay, now what can you do to, regardless of your feelings, to be supportive in this situation, you know? And that to me is the greatest thing about learning to do life differently.
Yeah.
Is those moments where I just sit there and I go, okay, yes, I did not put my foot in my mouth. I'll have a better tomorrow. You know?
Yeah, right.
Exactly. No, that is awesome. That is a big win. That is an awesome feeling too.
Right.
I know the feeling you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so good.
Well, it does, because, you know, like, I'm going to therapy, and each time I go, you know, she tells me techniques and whatnot, and she's given me pamphlets or papers or whatever, or told me to look at certain things, you know, and you get a lot of knowledge, but it's like going to school. You know, you're given a textbook, you're given notes during your class, you're given the syllabus telling you what you need to learn, but you still have to, you not only have to read it, but then it's the application of it via, you know, test or a real world situation, or, you know, depending on the subject and whatnot. It's like you still have to, just having the information is great, but being enlightened doesn't necessarily mean that you're a changed person. It just means you've read some stuff, you know? And like Henno, you know, you're saying, you know, now you're starting to apply it, and you're seeing results from applying it, you know, which makes you more receptive to these kind of things going forward. You know, it sets you on a spiral, but a positive spiral, not the opposite way. And you know, I think in a lot of therapy stuff, they tell you, like, if they tell you to do something daily, it's, 28 days, I think it is, for your brain to be reprogrammed basically on something. So, you know, it's a lot of work. That's why some techniques, you know, like listen, or every time you have a negative thought, replace it with something positive, kind of a thing. You know, they tell you to force yourself to do that for, you know, a month basically. And by the end of the month, you'll notice that you're doing it a little bit more, you know, kind of a deal. Because you've reprogrammed your brain a little bit. Maybe not fully, but, you know, you're getting it to at least go, hey, wait a minute, you know, what about over here? You know.
Mm-hmm.
Were you guys talking about the whole chop wood, carry water stuff?
Tony
before?
And I were, I think, or was that you and I?
Were, okay.
No, that was us.
Remember.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, I couldn't remember. Because you just said like that thing is like, okay, you gain some sort of enlightenment. That now what? You still chop wood, carry water.
Exactly.
You know, it's like the work's never done. You know, okay, yeah, I got a victory. So now what? Chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the work isn't. There's no finish line with this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's boy, I'm just totally segueing here, but that's the one thing about any time that you're trying to change your way of thinking, change your habits, change your, take these character defects and turn them into character assets. The hardest thing to get used to is the fact that this is a lifetime journey, that there is no finish line. But when I was finally able to accept that, hey, this is a lifetime journey, there's no finish line, but guess what? I have a purpose now.
Yeah.
I have something I can do. I can actually look forward to this as like, hey, no matter what, I'll always have this stuff to do. Whereas before I used to go at it as like, when am I done with this?
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard because you don't want to have to do this kind of stuff. But when you can change that to, I get to do this kind of stuff, that there is no finish line, it's that whole idea of reframing again.
Yeah. It's funny though, because, I've been through art classes. You're a musician. People who are athletes, or Jen's done, musicals and various stuff. No matter kind of what kind of an activity like that it is, that same thing holds true. You don't become better without practice. The work is never done. You listen to pro athletes all the time where they'll be like, we played a good game, but we could have been better. And you'll hear that countless times through a season. And it's so true, no matter what it is. Whatever your musical inclinations are, you generally will hear people say there's room for improvement or what. And it's not being hard on yourself. It's the truth. And that if you quit doing that work, you start to, regress, and it's one of the best things I think that was ever told to me was, when I first went to the doctor for depression and stuff, and Jen was there, or was it, I don't know, maybe it was when you went, I don't remember, when the doctor told us there's no medicine that will cure depression. All it does is helps you be able to fight it. And it's like, this is not, this is a marathon. This is not a long time thing. It will never just go away, essentially, or essentially won't go away, given current medicines. And that reset, like you said, Heno, that resets your mind once you accept it, and you look at it differently. And it's easy to look at it, as a person with depression, it's easy to look at it and go, man, so the rest of my life I'm fighting this, like, because it's already been so exhausting. But what you forget is that you haven't had the tools to fight it. It's like fist fighting a brick wall. Well, if you have a hammer, you can beat the wall a little easier, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at now, is I'm starting to get tools to be able to fight the brick wall rather than just punching it and tearing my hands up.
Well, and it's also, it's all about, changing your perspective, and I think having those words thrown at you, it helps you to just broaden your viewpoint. Something I read on Facebook actually this week that really struck home was when a door closes, open it.
Yeah. That's a great, they're
like, that's how it works.
Right.
Yeah.
And so often it's something that simple, but you stop and you're like, wow, instead of banging my head against a closed door, I can open it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Most of the time the door's closed because you closed it, many times too,
When you're on a path to some sort of recovery is when all of a sudden these silly cliches make you laugh and you go, oh my God, it's so cute.
You're so right. 100%.
Oh, it makes sense.
Because before recovery, you're just like, oh, that's so freaking stupid.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, to me, most of that would just get lumped into the just smile, or it gets better, or whatever.
Totally.
Like those things. It's like, no, it doesn't. Stop it. You know, it's like,
This is a
Stop
Detroit
it.
saying.
if it gets so much better, why are there so many suicides? And then your head goes
Yeah.
anyway. But I'm not going to get into that. But it's,
Yeah,
you know.
we don't need to go down the path.
Yeah.
So, Brian, before we get into our topic,
Yeah.
what's your win?
My win's not so much a... it's a mental win in that it's a burden lifted.
Okay, good.
And it's... I went to the neurologist recently for migraines, and he prescribed a medicine that my insurance wasn't going to pay for. But it looked on the website like maybe it was one where, like, if my doctor wrote a note, that they would then cover it. So I called them to see what I had to do, and I talked to the woman at their pharmacy department, and she was like, "You're on the Michigan Health thing, right?" And I was like, "Do you mean that blue and green card that I got?" And she goes, "Yeah." She's like, "Why don't you just run that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean run that?" And she's like, "Oh my God." And she's like, "It's there to cover what we won't cover." And I was like, I've had this card 3 years. This is the first time someone has told me that. Wow. I have paid for various medicines at
Oh my
times
gosh.
that I shouldn't have. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't mind that I paid for them, but it's just the idea that it was like, the whole point of that is for income, it's for people like me who don't have an income. And I was like, I've had this card the whole time. All I had to do was have the pharmacy run it. The pharmacy doesn't know that I have it, so they're not going to ask for it, And
Wow.
I was like, I'm like, the paperwork that came with it didn't say that. Because when I got it, I was like, oh, what's this for? All I know is that when I was at the hospital the one time to have blood work done, but when I was going to have my one knee operated on, they were like, "Do you have this card?" And I was like, "No." And the woman's like, "Well, you need to fill this out then." I was, okay, and I filled it out. I had no idea what it was for. Like,
What the
she
result
didn't.
was.
Yeah, and I get the card in the mail. The literature with it didn't really say. It's just, here's your
Wow.
card. Don't get rid of it. Blah blah. Okay, So I've had it with me all this time and no idea what it was for. I just thought that when you went to places in Michigan, you kind of had to show it as proof. I thought it was more of like an ID card. I didn't realize that it was actually like
a
an
benefit
insurance card. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
It gives you
my
benefits.
yeah. So my win for the week is realizing that some of the stuff I worry about, even if it's a minimal amount, it's when you don't really have an income, it's tough.
Right.
So
Well, I think the win might be even deeper than that.
I think so too.
I think the win is the fact that you didn't get angry. You didn't get, let the negative emotions take control.
No, because it was immediately like relief. It was what took over, because that's what it was at that moment. Because, like I said, it wasn't that I was insanely worried about the medicine coming up, but it was just the part that kills me and was that when I was on antidepressants before, I could have had those paid for. And they ended up being through a different program that luckily I qualified for. It was just like, so it worked out. It wasn't a huge deal, but just looking back, and I'm like, man, because at one point I was going to not take antidepressants because they were, like 100, what was that one? Like 150 a month or something. So I was like, I can't, who without a job can pull $150 a month out of their butt,
But I think this is a sign of really how your mindset is changing.
Yeah.
That you're not
it might be
focused on the negative, on the dark side of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, you're more focused on the relief and the positive side of things, which is, oh my gosh, look at how much this can potentially help me going forward.
I think a big reason for that is I don't really have anyone to pin any blame on. Because there wasn't a person who told me a contradictory story or, something like that. But you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so easy to beat, like, when those things happen to me, it's so easy to beat myself up and then start looking, like, looking into the past and go, oh, I could have this. But I actually see it for you as, like, with the old 20/20 hindsight, this is, like, part of the path. It was like, if you knew this a year or so ago or 2 years ago, and you could have gotten on some medicine, but you aren't doing the steps you're doing today.
Right.
Like, you would have just gotten on more medicine and maybe then never have gotten to this path.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
And it's like now for it to happen, it's like, it's perfect timing. It's like you're already on a positive solution based path now, and this is just a bonus for it. Whereas before, it actually could have been a crutch.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It could have been
stuck on medicines and never gone to the point of seeing, getting counseling help and that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
And just the way, you looked at it is like, oh, sweet, move forward, keep going.
Well,
That's huge.
Because now I don't have to, because it's been such a worry for me for the last, I don't know how many years, that when they prescribe something, the first thing I have to do is look to see if it's covered. And if it's covered, or if it's not covered, is it a copay, or is it, because some of my medicines have had a copay, and usually it's not much. It's, under $10. So those ones, it's like, whatever, I can come up with that. It's just like, the headache one is $33 a month, and that it's tough for me to just come up with $30. It's, it's $10 I can kind of scrounge or come up with, here and there occasionally, because it's a once a month thing. $30 a month's a whole different story, especially if I still have to pay another 10 into another one. And now knowing that, it's like, well, I shouldn't have to pay for any of these, which is good, because right now that's what I'm looking for. Is I'm not looking for a free ride as much as I'm just looking for some relief so I can get myself back to where I want to be, so that I can go back to work and be a normal member of society. Because I've never minded working. Like when I worked for 12 years straight and barely ever missed, like that kind of stuff. I don't call off. And I usually was that guy that always picked up extra hours, and I was never the I'm just going to work my minimum hours, and who wants to go home? Me. I was rarely the first guy to go. Most of the time I was like, you go ahead, I'll stay and close, or like that kind of thing. I can only think of one time I got mad because I was supposed to work until 10, and I was just not in the mood to work, and I get there and the manager's like, yeah, we need you to stay till close, and I'm like, I just remember the whole night just being mad about it. And I think it was because the one time I was like, I'm going to get to go home early tonight.
Right,
then it was taken away, and I was like, So that, like I said, it isn't that I'm really trying to find like easy street for the rest of my life or something. I'm just looking for something to help me until I can get back to that point,
Well, I'm glad that you're able to find the help. I'm glad it's available for you, and that you're able to get in touch with the right people.
The funny part is, though, like I put off that phone call to the insurance for like a week and a half. Like because I just hate dealing with people on the phone. Because so many times, like, it just, especially in the medical fields, you just feel like you're getting a runaround. And it was so nice. I called. I got sent right to the department I needed. And the woman, as soon as I said it, was just like, you could just hear in her voice that, oh, you poor thing, you've been worrying about, it was, you could tell she knew she was about to deliver awesome news to me, It was kind of funny. Wow. So I don't know, maybe that made her day a little bit to actually help and not get blamed for something. Because I'm sure that happens a lot in her job,
Yeah.
Sure. I'm sure. Well, my win for the week is it's great. It's a really great thing, but it kind of came through someone else, which is kind of weird. But I'll explain. My fiance came home from work, and we were talking, and he gave me a really big hug and said, he's like, I was talking with a couple guys at work, and the one guy was talking about his woman, and we were sharing stories and stuff, and he's like, and it just really reminded me and outlined how awesome you're doing balancing and handling everything, considering everything going on in your life, and with the bipolar and everything, you're just really managing and really keeping it together. And he's like, you're doing an amazing job. And it just struck home with me. I'm like, huh, I guess I am. You know, and even though I'm still having my issues, I'm still, you know, I had about a mania last week. I haven't really had any severe downs, which are good.
But in fairness, you're going to have bouts of mania, just like I'm going to have depression spirals.
Exactly.
It's going to, no matter what medicine we're on, those are still going to happen. So the fact that you, like we mentioned last show, how you dealt with it, you know, it shows your progress and your growth. That's, you know.
And it's just cool.
Like you're always doing with me. It's like, you know, quit minimizing, you know, accept that you're doing well and quit minimizing it.
Right. And it was really cool because it was the confirmation that from somebody from the, you know, not necessarily outside per se, but somebody recognizing the fact that I am doing my work. You know, I am putting my efforts in, and it has been work. I have been using all my tools, and and acting on it. So it's not just a natural state of being for me.
Well, and it's
great.
It's great too that he gets perspective on this. You know,
absolutely,
because I don't know if he's dealt with anybody who's bipolar before, and even if you have, each person's different, you know, so there's going to be similarities, but, you know.
He's dealt with people with high emotional swings, but nobody that's been diagnosed
fair
or
enough.
Medicated.
Right, but it's still good that, you know, things like this happen to where he keeps perspective also, because by doing that to him, that, you know, that made him see what you've done, and then he felt, you know, the need to express to you, which you need. You know, you need to know. You need other people sometimes to validate you. Even if that's not what your goal is, it's still super nice to always have somebody validate what you're doing, you know?
Absolutely.
It's like, you know, losing weight. It's nice when someone comes up and you look great, you know, you just like, awesome, I'm, you know, whatever. It's just a nice thing and it helps you, you know, it's a good motivator.
And it's interesting because, I mean, it is a learning experience for him as well as me. You know, we have been together, and gosh, it's going on 2.5 years that we've been together, and we're still in the learning phase. Yeah. You know, and just like...
Well, you're still in the learning phase on you, so it's, you know,
Everybody's still learning.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mentioned the fact after our last podcast, I was talking to him. I'm like, I was talking about how, and it just hit me that I was in a mania, that I was in a manic period. And he looked at me, he's like, you didn't know that? And I'm like, no, most of the time when I'm in a manic period, I don't.
Right.
I don't know it.
Well, and that's the thing, before you were diagnosed, like, you used to come to me at times with stuff, like when you were acting certain ways, and you would look to me to be like, and forgive the wording, but, you know, it's like, am I being crazy or not? You know? And there were times I'd be like, yeah, you're being crazy. And now we wouldn't say that because we know better. It's, you know.
It's rational or irrational.
Yeah, exactly.
It's better words. But and that's what, and he looked at me and he's like, oh, do you need me to tell you? I said, yeah, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, just as long as it's not done in a way like, are you having your period? You know, like, as long as it's not like that.
He's made the have you taken your meds joke a few times.
Yeah.
And I know how to take it.
Right.
We laugh about it.
Yeah.
Stuff, but he knows that's a tread carefully area.
Right. You know, it's funny. Heno and I were just talking about that before you jumped in with us. I mentioned about how, you know, if you watch like 80s and early 90s sitcoms, if someone mentions the word therapy, everyone's like, cuckoo, cuckoo, you know, oh, you're so crazy and all this. And now someone brings up therapy on a TV show and it's just like, oh, okay, you know, like, oh, yeah, I just went the other day. You know, it's like getting a coffee, you know.
Oh, we've grown. I love it.
You know, that's kind of the funny thing is most of us don't know when we're quote unquote in our disease,
right.
and we also don't know when we're in our recovery.
Yeah,
other people will see it in us before we see it in ourselves.
Definitely.
And
Good
so
point.
it's huge. It's huge to have that kind of feedback, especially when you're doing everything you can to do something differently, and it's so nice to have someone say, "Hey, you know what? I've noticed it."
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And
it's so true.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And you don't see a lot of things, and it's very nice to have an outside perspective kind of validate you.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've spent a lot of time on, is trying to identify like my triggers, essentially, so that I know when I'm when I'm near those triggers, that again, rules are going to change slightly. I need to let the people around me know. Like, a great example, people know that me and crowds don't necessarily work well together because of my anxiety. So when we're like, again, I was at the Brewfest with group of folks, and Jeannie was walking in front of me as we're going through just what felt like, while we were in it, this endless sea of humanity. And she was pushing through as quick as she could because it was making her anxious, and she doesn't really have an issue. And she, the whole time, was thinking, she's like, I can't imagine what it's doing to him, and just pushing through so that we could get to an opening, So now that, people knowing these things, they immediately are starting to look for that stuff for me, and helping me not necessarily avoid my triggers, but helping me cope with them when they're, like that. There's no way to avoid it. You're at an event with a lot of people, just like, C2E2. I'm super nervous about the crowds because that's a huge convention. So I'm not sure how that's going to go. Hopefully, but we'll see.
You'll have your support systems with you.
Everybody who's going with us is an awesome part of my support team. So it's, everyone knows it.
Yeah. Set yourself up for success. And which actually kind of leads right into our topic for tonight. But yeah, definitely set yourself up for success.
Exactly.
And that's when you'll find it.
Yep.
It's good to be a little bit nervous, but you also if you plan appropriately, you should be good to go. Now, brings us to our topic today. And our topic is actually, I'm going to use the word interview, but use this word, you can replace it with meeting someone for the first time, a first date, any type of interaction with someone who doesn't know you all that well or doesn't know you at all. And I wanted to kind of, for all of us, to talk about how can you present yourself in the best light, in the most positive light, when you have a hard time knowing it in your own head. As a lot of people with anxiety and a lot of people who have depression and mental illness or even lower self-esteem.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes your self-esteem isn't as high as it should be or could be.
Right. I was actually going to mention that because, somebody who's like, if you've been unemployed for a while, like, man, I just can't find a job. And, how you're presenting yourself may be the reason why you can't find your job,
Exactly.
And you just don't even realize it.
So I think this is not something that, it is, we are going to talk about it from a mental disorder perspective, but it is something that can be universally applied, I think, for everyone. Now, one of the things that I did find this wonderful article on social anxiety disorder, about health is the name of the website. And they talk about job interview anxiety. Now, again, they're specifically talking about job interviews, but I think this can be usually, these tools and tips can be used in so many different ways. Now, the first one that they're talking about is treat yourself well. Now, avoid caffeine, get enough sleep, exercise regularly, and these will reduce anxiety. I can see that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was just thinking the day of the interview because I was just like, don't hop up on caffeine. Yeah, try to get enough sleep and don't hop up on caffeine so that you're not walking in there and you're like, hey, so and they're like, oh, I don't want to be around this guy anymore.
Yeah, I think the worst feeling I would have is after any sort of an interview or any new situation like that, if I end up feeling like I wasn't my best because, and it wasn't me. It was because I, had too many cups of coffee. That would,
right, yeah.
You felt like you were losing your stuff, and it's not because you're like, oh man, why did I have that? Oh, that would just kill me.
Or like me, I with my trouble sleeping and such, there are days, and Jen can definitely account to this. If I don't have enough sleep and I try to function, I can't put words together. Like I can't form sentences, and I've gone into an interview that way, and it was probably one of the few that I've gone to where I usually interview really well, which is really odd for somebody, I've always kind of had an ability to just be on for interviews, but there was one time I didn't get enough sleep and I went in, and afterward I was like, there's no way they're hiring me. And it wasn't about being depressed or down on it was just, I was thinking of it from my perspective, like I wouldn't hire me. And sure enough, I didn't even get a call back, nothing, I was like, I gave off no energy. I couldn't put sentences together. And I was like, why would you want to hire somebody like that? So
if I real quick, I this is kind of a challenge for anyone, and this kind of comes from something that Angela talks about, and I don't know how much I believe it, but I understand it. Is all right. So you're saying set yourself up for success by taking good care of yourself, getting sleep, eating healthy, blah 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 blah. Well, a lot of us when we've been unemployed, not working, we're not exactly taking care of ourselves.
Exactly.
We're not in a really good place. We're not in a good headspace. And so Angela always talked about so act as if, don't wait to go to that interview until you've gotten yourself healthy, gotten enough sleep, blah, blah, blah. Walk in that interview as if you are in the best health, even though you might not be. Walk in there like you've gotten enough sleep, and you're, like that kind of idea. Because the reality is many of us aren't usually in those situations, and we will put stuff off for so long until we think okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah.
No, act as if you're ready. Just do it.
Yeah, it's like waiting until December or January to try to get yourself into bikini shape. It's like, if you just do this regularly. But you're right. Like, you get down on yourself and you get to a point that, you're just like, but if you go in there and hell, even if it's just for that day, and you just project that I'm, just go in there and I'm going to get this job. Even if you don't believe it for a second, look in the mirror and just, I'm going to get this job, and walk in and just,
Well, you guys are talking about the second one, which is visualize success.
Yep.
So,
okay.
Mind readers. You guys knew it was coming next. But yes, visualizing success. And that's exactly kind of what you guys were talking about, is you have that positive thinking, visualizing good things coming out of it, putting yourself in that good mind space, regardless of anything else, and just say, no, this is going to be a good thing. Good things are going to come out of this. Going into it positive.
Yeah.
So.
The hard part for me with any of these types of situations, and this does come down to my own self-esteem and my own fears, is just that whole balancing act of humility and ego and pride. Yes. And, you need to talk yourself up, but not too much.
Yeah.
You need to come across as someone that they'd like to hire because of my attitude. But, it's like this, there's a game to it that I don't like. Because it's like a guessing game. How am I supposed to present myself? Am I supposed to come in as the hard sale,
dude?
Or am I hate that.
This is exactly a conversation I've had with somebody about online dating. It's the same thing, and it's like Aziz Ansari points out in Modern Romance, his book that he's got out now, about how online dating shouldn't be called online dating; it should be called online introductions. Because that's what it is. And it's the same thing, though. It's like, well, what do I present? Because, actually, I don't know if you guys have watched, there's a show on Hulu called Casual. And this guy on it, he created an algorithm for a dating website. And he said when he first put his profile up, he put all the truth on there. And he's like, I got, no hits. Which, there's no way, because this guy's a good-looking dude. He'd have gotten some hits. But anyway, And then he changed it to where he started putting the ideal stuff, and all of a sudden he's like, I got like 2,000 hits like the next day. And I'm like, exactly. You can read profiles of people, and you can probably guess which ones just based on those probably get more hits than others. And it's something I've weighed when looking at mine, because I'm like, how truthful do you be versus how much do you
play to the masses?
Yeah, I don't want to say lie, but you generalize a little more, maybe, rather than being specific. Whoops. And but it's the same thing for an interview. What parts of your strengths do you play up? And because you have to be careful, because some things that kind of maybe you see as a strength might be a weakness to other people, or they, because maybe they've had people tell, or maybe it's just what they hear from the same person over and over and over. Every girl has heard how nice and how great a guy is, right? Every guy is funny, he'll treat you right, blah, blah, but they all have stories of how they don't, and employers are the same way. Oh, I'm too hardworking, that's my biggest drawback. Stop it.
Right.
You know what I used to tell people? Here's a quick question for you. Like, when I got asked that, I was always like, I'm too loyal. And that I will give more of myself to the company than I will give of myself to myself. Like, I will redline, basically, because I'm trying to do what's good for the company. I have done that at every place I've worked at. I have burnt myself completely out. And that is a flaw. It doesn't maybe seem like it, but it is definitely a flaw. Because when you're burnt out like that, you're worthless.
Mm-hmm. You got to have good work-life balance.
When you use the term, what did Ansari say? The introduction.
Yeah.
That is a great way of reframing interview.
Mm-hmm.
Don't consider it an interview. Consider it just an introduction.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about this whole idea of when do you talk? All right, so your employer or where you're employed becomes kind of part of your daily team. It's part of your tribe. And at some point or another, you're going to have to talk about mental health stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe there's a time where everyone's renewing health insurance and you have to come out and say, by the way, I'm diagnosed as because it has to be put on the health forms, and now the general manager is going to see him, that kind of stuff. And you sit there and you say, all right, do I say this now, and just, am I honest up front, or do I hold it back? Am I being deceptive? And I realize it's an introduction.
Yeah.
It's the outer layer of the onion. And there is no shame in holding back things that are just naturally part of getting to know people.
Right. See, we had this conversation when Clint joined us on here when we talked about it, because we were talking about with anxiety and depression on dating profiles. Do you put that on Front Street? I've seen people who do, and I always am like, I'll tell you honestly now, when I see that, if I'm kind of iffy about the person, sometimes that pushes me toward, like, you know what? I kind of like the fact that they're willing to just say, this is me. You know? I love the brutal honesty about it. How vulnerable they are at that point, because from minute one, you could exploit that. And that's a position to put you have to be careful putting yourself into. Or a lot of people might, because you just never know. If someone goes, I deal with depression, somebody could go, man, that's a big window. I don't know how bad your depression is. I don't even want to get involved, And we had that same talk, and same in an interview kind of a thing with it. It's where do you, because right now, if I were to go apply for a job, do I tell them? No, I wouldn't. I would hold it to myself until later. I don't think I would tell people, because I think when I do. Okay. Sorry, let me. I know.
You finish.
I was going to say, I just don't think I would want, and maybe it's just my thing, but I just don't think I'd want them judging me or hiring or not hiring me based on that.
Well, I just want to say the legalities of it for everybody out there. And I apologize for jumping on you.
No, it's fine.
Phrasing, but I just want to clarify for everyone. There's, when you're dealing with mental illness or any sort of health issues when it comes to the workplace, mental illness is covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So you can be covered under that act if you put it on your application and it is in your master file.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
If you do not claim it and effectively notify the employer at the time of hiring, so they have to hire you with the knowledge that you have mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Then you will not be covered for the majority. And there's always exceptions. There's always, different ways around it and stuff. But for the majority of the situations, you kind of have to make that decision up front, whether you're going to say, yes, I do have mental illness, or if you're going to keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Now, once you've been hired on, if you want to get it added to your record, you have to have that conversation with the employer.
Yeah.
And the employer and you would have to make that determination whether it's you want to add it or not, because the employer has the right to make decisions. They can't make a decision based upon the illness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they can make decisions based upon performance.
Right.
So, especially in right to work states and things. So there's just a lot of legalities in there. So just be aware of what your rights are and what you are going to do prior to getting a new job.
I would also probably say
so important.
Yeah, that it probably has. There's probably, and a person to ask about this too. Aside from not the legality so much.
Yeah.
I mean, if they have an HR department, you can do that later, but you can't really do it ahead of time. But would be like your therapist. If you're in a therapy situation, ask them kind of what they think and how you should behave, and just kind of maybe, you don't have to do exactly what they say, but maybe just ask them what they think. Because if you're in a position to where whatever your mental illness is, and if you've got a pretty good control of it to where it really doesn't affect your life as far as your job much, I don't know how much I would want to put that out there, because it just gives people something to, I don't know, it just gives them fodder. It just feels like the old bully mentality, like you don't want to show any weakness, because when you show weakness, then it gives them a loophole to exploit. I've been that way for so long, and I've seen people show stuff, and then it isn't directly why they get fired, but like you said, they start looking at stuff, and
Now, there's also,
I don't know, but yeah.
So something else that you'll see on applications and things is that it's a checkbox.
Yeah.
It's do you fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act?
Yeah.
And you it's a yes, no, and you just check mark it, and they don't ask what, you don't tell what.
Yeah.
You just I am under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Just to point out, make sure that first of all, you have to be diagnosed to fall under that category.
Yeah. Absolutely. You have to have a medical diagnosis.
You can't self-diagnose and do that. Second of all, make sure what you're diagnosed as. I think, like you said, I think most mental illness stuff falls under that, but just make sure. Yeah. Because if it doesn't, you don't want it to come out at some point that you, I don't know, lied. Like it's
unintentionally.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But you still wouldn't want that, because that could go badly for you too. But just make sure, read up on your rules in your state. For
absolutely.
that.
And just and be. Knowledge is power. I mean, and that's another one on this list here, which is be prepared.
Yes.
Be prepared, people. Do your research. It's really great. It helps the anxiety a lot when you're prepared. Run through. Online has 1,000,001 interview questions. Yeah. Just do a sampling of interview questions. Think about the ones that most commonly come up in interviews that you've been in the past. Yeah. Get some answers. I do not recommend writing out an answer per se and memorizing it or anything like that, because I think that's going to come across as too trite or too
rehearsed.
Rehearsed.
You want them to feel like what you're answering is genuine, because if they feel like you're just going into robot mode, they aren't going to feel like you have any investment in the job. Like that you don't feel, not excited, but that you
The passion.
Yeah, that you haven't emotionally invested in the job. Like, and you should. If you go in and it's a job you want, you shouldn't be sitting there just trying to, like it's a test. It should be a conversation.
And bullet points are great. I mean, I would recommend making bullet points of key topics that you want to talk about yourself, key stories and stuff like that. Make sure, though, that you gear your stories and you gear your information to the area, so you can make bullet points of key things that you want to bring up, but then gear those to the given job or the given situation that you're in.
That goes for your resume / application as well.
Yes.
If you have relevant skills, put them. If you have a bunch of skills that are you still list them, but make sure if you do any talking about yourself, don't necessarily hype up the stuff that's not relevant to the job.
Now, same thing goes for if we're going for like first dates, dating, or meeting someone for the first time. Same thing can apply. You want to make sure that everybody has their cocktail stories, the stories that they can tell people over a drink, someone they don't know very well. Make sure you have those rehearsed. Have a clean one and a maybe not so clean one. You want to make sure you have a variety of things that you can choose from, but make sure you have all those little stories in the back of your head that you can pull out over cocktails or in any sort of social situation that you're meeting someone. If
you tell stories in an interview, the word concise needs to be your friend. Don't ramble.
I'm very verbose, and I have a tendency to continue to repeat myself, as everyone who listens to podcasts already knows, I'm sure. I talk a lot, and I repeat myself a lot, but that's part of my charm.
That's my greatest kind of fear and issue anytime I'm in a situation where I'm with somebody new, whether it's I've been asked to mentor somebody, or I'm doing something musically where I'm, meeting someone for the first time, whatever that is. And that is just not, it's just not shutting my mouth and trying to explain everything at that moment and try to cover all the bases and all that. And that's why I love this idea of calling it an introduction.
Yeah.
There will always be more time to reveal more.
And that's the thing, like you said, people try to cram so much into that time they're in the interview because they want to tell you everything great about them. But realistically, most interviewers probably have about 3 questions that they want the answers to. That those 3 questions are probably the ones that allow them to glean what they're really looking for. But you never know what those questions will be. So.
They're usually the ones that they repeat 3 or 4 times in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, I was just going to say they reword them. Yep, very much so. They reword questions, and basically it's because it's important to them. Yeah. Yep.
Now, another one on this list, which, did I mention Wiggle, Wiggle, Wiggle on the show?
You did a while ago,
You did, yeah.
Okay, a while ago. Because this one, it's release anxious energy.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a way of leaking out even when you think that you have it well hidden. If you find yourself fidgeting, try doing something to release anxious energy that no one will notice, such as wiggling your toes. There you go, folks. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Wiggle those toes.
Yep.
It makes a difference. Someone told me that, and in case you're getting lightheaded, it gets the blood flowing to your toes as well as your head, so it's good to prevent you from fainting. Just so you know, wiggle those toes.
Yeah, it's tough. A lot of it depends. Like if you're sitting across a desk from someone, you can get away with that without them really noticing, probably.
You can wiggle your toes in your shoes.
Yeah, but if you're sitting just in a room, like if it's just chair to chair, I still probably can see your foot moving. Like, it's still a nervous twitch, basically, which is
yeah.
expected, but it's still, you're supposed to try to cover as much of the nervous energy as you can, but it's so hard to do, because most of it's involuntary. Like, you don't even realize you're doing it sometimes, and next thing you know, you realize your knee's bouncing, or you keep fiddling with your fingers or whatever, so it's a tough thing to deal with. But you're right, if there's a way you can kind of focus that energy somewhere else, as long as it doesn't take away from your attention,
Right. Exactly. You want to be able to still stay focused. So you got to make sure whatever you're doing, you can be focused.
Right. Like much like right before you go in, just sit and breathe. Focus on your breathing, and
Yes.
Yeah, it's one thing that you talked about. Breathing is like the first thing I thought about. Is one of the things I get nervous about is a pause.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time to realize that it's okay to pause. It's actually, silence isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to fill the space, like I have to answer, like I have to have it right there. And it's weird, like when I see other people who will pause, like take a breath, like it doesn't bother me. I don't judge them for that, but I judge myself for it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's just weird.
I'm finding that in therapy a lot. Like I'll be talking, and then I stop, and she doesn't say anything, and I'm kind of like, all right, and then it's like, then I'll start talking again. And I find that what it's doing, though, is it's encouraging me to ramble, is essentially what it is. I don't know if that's not what she's doing, but what in my head, that's what's like, oh, you got to fill this space. And, because my therapy sessions are 45 minutes. So, again, much like an interview, I'm trying to dump as much information out as I can during that time, So I've been trying to pace my wording better so that I'm not falling into that. Not so much because I'm trying to hide or keep anything, but it's led to better sessions because we have a little more of a back and forth when I do that. When I ramble, I think she's trying to take it all in. And then by the time she's going to reply, I'm moved on to something else. So I'm in the end not really giving her any room.
What do you guys think about if you did this consciously? Like, how would you react if like, even though you knew, if they ask you the question, whatever it is, in part of the interview, and you know the answer, you already have it prepared, but you sit there and you count to 3 inside your head.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think that would come across?
You need to get out of my head. I was just thinking that. I seriously was just thinking that. My goodness. But yes, I agree with you 100%, Hannah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
With that, because that seems like one of those things where it's like, and I mean, talk about poker face.
Yeah.
If you did that for everything, you come across as very consistent and not like hyped up.
Right.
Like overly excited. It would almost give you an appearance of having a calm that you may not actually even have inside.
Right. Yeah. Not to mention it makes it look like you are actually thinking about what you're going to say. Like you're not going to give the rehearsed answer or whatever, kind of a thing. Because I've interviewed enough people. I've seen it so many times. Like, you'll ask them, like, why should we hire you? That's on almost every interview I've ever been in. Why should we hire you? And people have a hard time with that one because that's the ego versus humble situation. Because you really want to go, because I'm awesome. But if you say that, they're going to go, like, really? We went there, huh? All right. Kind of a thing. So I think it might help with that, too. Especially, maybe if you're a person who comes across as a little too forward or overconfident, that might help tone you down a little bit, too,
Actually, that's a good point. Yeah, because that makes me nervous. Like, am I coming across? You do want to project confidence, but you don't want to come across as arrogant.
Yeah, you don't want to just seem like you're sitting down going, so instead of wasting our time on this interview, why don't you just hire me? What are we doing here?
Just hand it over. Right
yeah,
here.
just
you got the keys.
You want me? Let's go.
Can we just negotiate salary? Let's just get this over with.
Right. Well, I think, and the last one that we're going to touch on is celebrate good times. Yeah. You have a good time, you don't have a good time, doesn't matter. Go celebrate. Congratulate yourself. Do something nice for yourself because you've made it through something that is a difficult situation.
Yeah.
So definitely make sure you give yourself a kudos.
Well, because that's, the truth of the matter is it's not always easy to even get out of the house sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you made it. You went there. You went and did it.
Mm-hmm.
You had all the emotions and feelings and you got out of there. And yeah, you're going to be rehashing the stuff in your head. Get out and celebrate. Don't rehash. That's probably the hardest thing to do is to go afterwards and second guess yourself.
Yeah.
And I think making it a celebration every time and looking at just, we forget sometimes how hard it is, like I said, just to get out the door and do these things and celebrate that you did it. That's the victory right there. It's a great, great tip.
Yeah, especially if it's, just for the average person, that's true. And then if you're a person, like you said, or like, with depression, anxiety, whatever else, it's even more so, a victory because you've overcome normal anxiety levels and you've probably overcome heightened anxiety levels because of what you're already dealing with, or you're overcoming your depression. And, that is a win. I mean, seriously, I've said it on this show before. If I go out of the house, like I go to a store or something, I count those days as wins. And most people would be like, really? And I'm like, yeah. Days I used to walk to the mailbox, which was 2 houses down from us, I counted as a win, and sometimes that's what you have to do. Just like, recovering alcoholics don't, they count days, and then it becomes weeks, months, years, like that kind of thing. Sometimes you have to take it down to the most basic number and celebrate that. Hey, I got through this. Awesome. Celebrate it,
Yep. There's always something to celebrate.
Yeah. But it's easy to second guess yourself. Like, how many times after a date or after a test or an interview do you just sit there and, like you said, in your mind, you just relive the whole thing? Like, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do,
That's when the Lion King comes in.
You already said be prepared earlier. My head already went down the road then.
True.
I've had Scar singing in my head for the whole show, basically.
But you gotta, the Lion King's got a lot of lessons for us to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing, Frozen. Get that song stuck in everybody's head.
Do you know how many times I've heard that song? Once.
Really? The Let It Go?
Yep. I was in Toys R Us and it played, and I was like, oh, is this that Let It Go song? And I was with my nephew, and he's like, you haven't heard this? And I'm like, well, I don't have a kid, and I don't work at a video store anymore, so,
Gotcha.
Unlike, say, like Colors of the Wind from Pocahontas, I've heard that song about 8 billion times.
I bet.
I can honestly say I've never heard Frozen from beginning to end. Or whatever, Let It Go. Or whatever it's
yeah.
called.
Let It Go from beginning to end.
That's what I said. That's the only time I've heard it.
I never, ever, ever heard it from beginning to end.
That's so awesome. Between you and I, we've heard it once. That's awesome.
I've heard it somewhere briefly, somewhere, but I've never, ever heard the song from beginning to end.
Yeah. Why don't you want kids? We just gave you the... No, I'm kidding.
There's actually this really amazing video on YouTube of this young father and his little girls in the back in the car seat, and they're in the car, and the song came on, and he's like, oh, look, it's your jam, and he turns it up, and she starts singing. So he's like encouraging her, going, come on, there's a big part coming up. You ready for your solo? Here it comes. And she's just belting it out in the background. He's like, time for Dad's solo. And he's drumming on the steering wheel.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
That's cool.
Yep.
So amazing to see this guy get so jazzed about his little girls singing this song and getting so into it and so excited for her.
Well, it's
Yeah.
either
He's
that or
probably
you
heard it 100 times.
Yeah, I was going to say it's either that or you go into a blind rage. So
Yeah.
it's one or the other, and he's just choosing the right way of framing it.
Exactly.
You know?
I mean, he's just rocking it out with
Yeah.
her, and he's like, "Ready? The big part's coming." And
So-
he just takes his deep
Yeah.
breath. It's awesome.
Yep.
It's so awesome, and that dad is, best dad in the world at that moment. So, but anyway, so I guess unless
Really
you guys
quick.
have something else to do.
Yeah,
Yep.
I saw when we were looking up stuff for the show, I actually saw one tip that it's just a general tip for your application or resume that I thought was really good, especially if you're a person with lower self-esteem.
Mhm.
And it's like before you submit your resume or whatever, maybe have someone else look it over for you and or write it for you.
That's a great idea.
That way you don't, because if you have a lower sense of self-worth, you're going to reflect that on the application. And, somebody else may look at it and go, well, why'd you put this? You actually did this. They may proofread it for you and kind of help you correct it, so it's a little more accurate.
And I've
Like,
got
the
the
only thing I
cheesy.
would caution is make sure. I was just make sure that use your words, not
Yeah, not their words. Yeah.
because in some cases you might use. Yeah, you might somebody might say something differently than you would,
Yeah.
and it may come across as disingenuous right, in the interview if you're not using the same words that they would use.
Right.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just words that aren't in your vocabulary or something. I've ran into that before. I actually have helped people with their resumes before, and I've done that because I realize that my vocabulary is bigger than theirs. So I'm like, okay, roll it down one level, and because otherwise, if they get asked, they might not. Because how awful would that be? You're in an interview, and they're like, "So, what's this word? What do you mean by this?" And they have no clue because they don't know what the word means.
Oh, it'd be horrible.
Yeah. Oh, how embarrassing.
So I've got the cheesy encouragement line for everyone, and I can't believe these words are about to come out of my mouth. But
Oh, yay!
so I was talking to my coach about this yesterday or some things, and he brought this up, and it reminded me that this is a truth I do believe in. And I'll frame it one way: if you're religious in any way, shape, or form, remember you are made in God's image. That makes you a perfect being. And remind yourself that you are a perfect being, that there's nothing wrong with you.
Yes.
And if you're not religious, another way of looking at it is like, I believe that, I'm made up of the same stuff that this earth is made up, that this universe is made up, and the universe is infinite. And therefore, so am I.
Yep.
I'm the perfect me.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the truth, because if you look at, like Henno said, if you look at all of us at our absolute core, what we're made from is the same thing person to person.
It is.
Aside from, obviously, when you get into the chromosomes and stuff, but I mean the actual essence of what a human's made from.
The stuff.
Yeah. Those, when you take neurons and you just apply every chance that they have, they create differently. They don't replicate much, aside from like a twin situation or something, but so it's why I hate when I hear people say that they're broken or whatever. It's like, no, you're not broken. When you say you're broken, to me, I hope that you're at rock bottom when you say that, because if you still feel there's somewhere to go after that, man, that's a bad place to be.
Yeah.
I understand, I for a long time thought that I was broken, and then, you start realizing, what, if I'm broken, what is it, a third of people or 2/3 of people, whatever it is, will have some sort of mental health issue in their lifetime. So if I'm broken, a whole bunch of other people are broken too.
Yeah.
And when you're not alone, it's, I don't know, you know what I mean? It's like saying, oh, well, I'm weird. And it's like, well, half the people react the same way. You're not really weird when you look at the math. Kind of a thing. It's like, are you broken?
Right.
No, you're not. You're just different than that person. But you're supposed to be.
Yeah,
you know?
you're the perfect you.
Yeah.
There is no other.
Yeah.
There is no identical. Everybody's exactly the same. That doesn't exist.
Right.
We're each individuals, and thus that makes us perfect.
Yep.
We are perfect person
Yep.
the way we are.
It's why we fought on the show about the word normal. It's why I hate the word normal so much.
Yep.
I just it's striving for something. It's like listening to fairy tales and trying to base your life on them. You know, they don't exist. You know, that's not how life works. You know, you know, or, you know, a lot of people have cited the same thing with like porn, you know, well, that's not how real life is. It's like, well, yeah, exactly. It's a fantasy thing. So you're supposed to, you generally understand those things. So don't do that with anything else. Don't look at someone else's life and say, well, why isn't my life that way? Because yours isn't supposed to be that way. You know, it's just not how it's, you know, it's going to work. You're not them. You didn't make the same decisions they make. You know.
I've been switching the word normal for traditional in most of my conversations because I'm really not liking the word normal.
Yeah, it's why I said the more I hear it, the less I like it. Yeah.
Because I've been switching it for traditional in a lot of cases because it makes sense. Because someone will say, like, with planning the wedding, I'm doing some things that are non-traditional, and they're like, so you're not having a normal wedding?
Yeah, exactly. You're right, though.
Yeah, it's like I'm having a non-traditional one, but it's pretty normal. I'm getting married, you know, and there's going to be I-dos, and I'll be married after we say it. So, yeah, it's pretty...
Yeah, it
seems standard.
It's pretty sure that's what most weddings have in them.
But it's not going to be traditional per se, like religious traditional or traditional.
But even that, how many religions are there? How many different, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many different ways you can even look at traditional. It's the same idea. It's why I just hate it. It's like, quit trying to measure up to something. Or, you know, this was a great thing I heard the other night, and I am so guilty of a lot of my issue when I was in art school was I looked at what the other students were producing. And like in high school, I was one of a few that were the upper crust of the artists, right? Then obviously you get to college, bigger pool, smaller fish, you know, and you go, wow, everyone in this class is on their worst day as talented as I am, you know? And you're like, and you don't realize what that should do is go, I need to keep putting the work in. Maybe this guy is better than me because he spends all his time drawing. I only spend half my time drawing. You know, you don't know those things. And so I've always been horrible about seeing others and comparing myself, going, well, I can't live up to that, and then I'll just, and I'm done with something. I was listening to Bill Burr the other night, his podcast, and somebody wrote in you'd almost swear if you listened to his show, you would almost swear I wrote it because it was about that exact thing. And he goes, look, he's like, Richard Pryor's the greatest of all time. I'll never be as good as him. He's like, but it's all about seeing how close I can get. Yep. And I was like, that is the right way to frame that. If you're going to compare yourself, don't do it in a way that stops you from trying. Just go, listen, he's the greatest of all time. I'm never going to get there. And then if you do get there, awesome. But, you know.
And maybe on the way you find your own greatest.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's, you know, because that's the thing I think with interviews too, that a lot of us get intimidated when we walk in and we see somebody in a certain position or whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, some people have talent, but for the most part, it's all a set of skills. And anyone can learn these skills. Yep. And when people get arrogant about their skills, especially computer guys, we have this assistant to our IT guy at work comes in, and he's just got this attitude, and he's like this gamer little grommet dude. And I'm like, you know, you went to school and you learned a set of skills.
Yeah.
I can do it too. Yeah. You're not unique. You're not special.
Right.
and that's the truth is like all of us can learn these skills. And that's why I like this idea of us being, you know, infinite in that anything is possible for us. We're never, we can't compare our insides with other people's outsides, you know, because this guy might be the greatest in this way. And you're going to find your own greatest. You might not want that guy's greatest.
Right.
You know?
That's the thing.
So find your own greatest.
So many times, too, you see this stuff, like in the arts, whether it's music or art, you know. you see a lot of these times that these people who are the most talented are the most tortured people. And it's like, do you want that? Do you want those kind of, I mean, listen, people hold, like Kurt Cobain in huge regard, right?
Right.
I wouldn't want to fight the demons he fights. I fight some of the demons he fought. I don't want anyone to have to fight these. They're awful. If that's what it takes to put out that kind of art, no thanks. That's the way I've always felt about it, It's
Well, we think we're getting to the point where we probably should be wrapping
Yep.
up. As much as I love talking with you guys, we got to save some for next week. So if the people at home or at work or in your car would like to continue the conversation, you can contact me via Twitter at Jen's Crazy Life. You can contact the show at the Crazy Life Podcast at Outlook.com or go to our website at thecrazylifepodcast.weebly.com. And Henno, how can they reach out to you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ida Henno.
Nice. And
And I was
Bryan?
thinking I think I should do an email that's like crazylifehenno at blah blah blah.com.
Go for it.
We probably could do that through the website, I would think.
Actually, you probably can do different emails, huh?
Yeah, I never even thought about it, yeah.
Absolutely. That would be kind of cool.
I want to point out that we're part of the Tangent Bound Network and the Wicked Radio Network. So if you get a chance, please go check them out. There's all sorts of awesome shows on both of those networks, and they've been pretty good to us. Also, I wanted to mention, if you're looking for new podcasts, aside from checking out those two networks, if you're on Twitter, type in the search window, type hashtag Podern Family. Like you're spelling the word modern, but put a P in front instead of the M. And there's all sorts of shows. It's basically, it's the indie podcasters out there have kind of taken to where we're becoming our own hype machine. Because we realize that, like guys like, Rogan and Marin, they put out great shows, but they don't need help advertising, because they're already getting millions of downloads. So, but a lot of shows get overlooked because there's so many out there and a lot of people don't know really where to go find them. So check out hashtag Podern Family. And there's, like I said, there's all sorts of shows out there and we've all been trying to help each other, get the word out on other shows. Let's see, you can find me on Twitter, or actually you can find the show account where I usually post like the new episodes are up, and I'll retweet stories and stuff that I find on Twitter at the Crazy Life Pod. And you can find me on Twitter at Stunami. You can check out the other podcast I'm part of, which is Salty Language, on Twitter at salty_language or at saltylanguage.com. And, be warned, it's a much different show. It's a not safe for work show.
Salty.
Yeah. And then, of course, I want to point out we're not doctors, therapists, trained professionals, or licensed in any way. We're just sharing our stories and tips that we find in hopes that they can help other people. If you think you are suffering from a mental illness or what have you, go get help. Please don't self-diagnose because that can be dangerous. But, go talk to somebody instead. Get the help you need. A lot of areas have programs that can help out for people with low income if you need it. Just check your Board of Mental Health if you have one, or the Department of Human Services. Usually they can point you one way. Or check your libraries, churches, any community gathering kind of place, because a lot of times there's support groups that are out there as well. And also, I was given this number by my therapist this week, and it's a 24-hour suicide crisis support line. But she also said that you can call, just basically for anything. If you just need someone to talk to, whether it's, you're having an anxiety issue or just you're really depressed or just whatever kind of a thing like that you need. And that number is 1-800-273-8255. And that's a nationwide number. I don't know if it'll, probably won't work in other countries so much, but in the U.S., that's, a number to check out. And that always leads me into the last part, which is if you are feeling suicidal, please call a number like that or call 911. Tell them you're having a mental health emergency, or if someone in your support group is available, call them. Don't be alone. and please don't make any drastic choices.
If you have a moment, you have a choice. You know that, everybody. All right, with that, keep breathing, and remember, you're the perfect you.
Welcome to the Wicked Radio Network.